Google Chrome is constantly being patched for security vulnerabilities. New fixes ship every few weeks, sometimes every few days. And the gap between when Google releases a patch and when most users actually have it installed is measured not in hours, but in days, sometimes weeks. That gap is where the risk lives. An unpatched browser is not a minor inconvenience. It is an open window that security researchers and the attackers who follow their published work know exactly how to climb through. Today, I'm going to explain exactly how Chrome's update system works, what the vulnerabilities being patched actually are and what they can do, and why the single most impactful security habit available to any Chrome user costs nothing and takes about 30 seconds. Let me start with something that surprises most users when they first learn it. Chrome is one of the most actively maintained pieces of software on any platform. Google releases updates to Chrome's stable channel on a schedule that has accelerated significantly over the past several years. Until 2021, Chrome released major versions every 6 weeks. Google then shortened that to 4 weeks, then to approximately every 4 weeks with additional security fixes shipped between major releases as needed. The result is that Chrome receives security patches more frequently than almost any other consumer software. That frequency is a response to reality. Chrome is the most used browser in the world. It is the target of more active security research, both by Google's own Project Zero team and by independent researchers than any other browser. The attack surface is enormous, and the incentive to find vulnerabilities in it is correspondingly large. Chrome operates on several update channels that serve different populations and different purposes. The stable channel is what most users run. It receives thoroughly tested updates that have been verified to not introduce new problems before they reach the general public. The beta channel receives updates approximately 4 weeks before they reach stable, giving developers and interested users an earlier look at what is coming while accepting some risk of instability. The dev channel receives updates approximately 9 weeks before stable, with even less testing and more frequent experimental changes. The Canary channel receives daily builds, the bleeding edge of Chrome development, with no stability guarantees whatsoever. For security purposes, the stable channel is the right choice for virtually all users. The testing it receives before release is specifically designed to catch problems including security regressions, where a fix for one vulnerability accidentally introduces another. Running beta or dev channels in pursuit of newer features exposes you to known instability without providing meaningful additional security benefit, because the security fixes that matter most are the ones that have been validated through the full testing pipeline and released to stable. Understanding what gets patched in these updates requires understanding what Chrome vulnerabilities actually are, which in turn requires a brief explanation of how Chrome is structured. Chrome is built on a security architecture called the sandbox. The sandbox is a compartmentalization system that separates the code running web content, the JavaScript, HTML, and other code from websites you visit from the rest of your computer. The idea is that even if a malicious website finds a bug in how Chrome processes its content, the sandbox prevents that bug from giving the attacker access to your files, your system, or other applications. The website code runs in a restricted environment that cannot escape to affect the broader system. This is a strong security model in principle, and it provides real protection in practice. But it depends on the sandbox being correctly implemented, which in turn depends on code that is extremely complex, and therefore prone to the kinds of subtle errors that create vulnerabilities. The two categories of vulnerability that appear most frequently in Chrome's security patches are memory corruption bugs and sandbox escape bugs. Memory corruption vulnerabilities arise from errors in how Chrome manages the memory it uses to process web content. Use after free bugs occur when Chrome code continues to reference a region of memory after that memory has been freed, potentially allowing an attacker to control what is at that memory address and cause Chrome to execute attacker-controlled code. Heap buffer overflow bugs occur when code writes more data to a memory region than the region can hold, overwriting adjacent memory in ways that can corrupt program behavior or give attackers control over code execution. Out of bounds, read and write bugs access memory outside the intended region, potentially leaking information or allowing code execution. These bugs are not theoretical. They are discovered regularly by Google's Project Zero team, by security researchers at companies including Microsoft, Apple, and various security firms, and increasingly through automated fuzzing systems that generate millions of random inputs to Chrome's code, looking for crashes that indicate vulnerabilities. Google publishes a Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures Identifier, a CVE number, for each vulnerability it patches. Reading Chrome's release notes, which Google publishes for every stable channel update, shows a consistent stream of memory corruption fixes, rated by severity from low through medium, high, and critical. Critical severity vulnerabilities are the ones that deserve the most attention because they are the ones where exploitation can occur without meaningful user interaction. A critical severity. Chrome vulnerability might allow a malicious website to execute arbitrary code on your computer simply by you visiting the page. No download required, no file to open, no suspicious link to click deliberately. The page loads, the vulnerable code runs, and if you have not updated, the attacker has code running in your browser process. The sandbox is the next line of defense when a content process vulnerability is exploited. A successful content process exploit typically gives the attacker control over the Chrome renderer process, which is the sandbox process handling web content. From there, escaping the sandbox to affect the broader system requires a second vulnerability, a sandbox escape. Sandbox escape vulnerabilities are separately patched and separately rated for severity. The combination of a content process exploit and a sandbox escape, called a full chain exploit, is what gives an attacker control of the operating system from a malicious web page. These full chains are rare and typically expensive for attackers to develop and deploy, but they exist and they work specifically against unpatched browsers, and the window of exposure between a patch being released and a user installing it is where this matters in practice. When Google releases a Chrome update that patches a critical vulnerability, the release notes describe the vulnerability in general terms. Security researchers who have been tracking the vulnerability now know that a patch exists, which tells them a confirmed bug was present in the previous version. Reverse engineering the patch, comparing the patched code to the unpatched code to identify exactly what changed and why, is a known technique that skilled researchers can perform in hours to days. The time from patch release to publicly available exploit code has shrunk dramatically over the past decade. What was once a window of weeks is now sometimes a window of days. Users who have not updated are running the vulnerable version during this window. Their browser contains the bug that the patch fixed. If they visit a malicious page during that window on a browser that has not yet applied the patch, the vulnerability is available for exploitation. The patch that protects them is available. It is downloaded to their machine. It will install the next time they restart their browser, but they have not restarted because nothing prompted them to, because restarting feels interruptive, because they are in the middle of something. The protection exists and is not applied. The vulnerability exists and is available. This is the practical security case for the habits we are about to discuss. Not abstract security hygiene. Concrete reduction of the window during which a known patched vulnerability remains exploitable on your specific machine. The first habit is verifying that auto updates are enabled and functioning. Open Chrome. Type Chrome, go to Settings, Help in the address bar and press Enter. This page shows your current Chrome version and checks for updates. If an update is available, it will download automatically, and the page will show you a prompt to relaunch Chrome to apply it. If Chrome is current, it will say so. Checking this page takes approximately 15 seconds. Doing it once a week ensures you are never more than 7 days behind on security patches. Doing it whenever you see the colored update indicator in Chrome's menu, a green indicator for recent updates, orange for updates several days old, and red for updates over a week old, ensures you apply patches within the recommended window. The indicator appears in the three-dot menu at the top right of Chrome when an update has downloaded and is waiting for a restart to apply. Most users see this indicator and either do not know what it means or choose to deal with it later. Clicking it and selecting Update. Google Chrome or selecting Relaunch applies the downloaded patch immediately. The browser closes and reopens, which takes approximately 10 seconds, and the security patch that may have been waiting for days is applied. This is the single most impactful security action available to the majority of Chrome users, and it takes 10 seconds. The second habit is restarting Chrome regularly rather than leaving it running indefinitely. Many users leave Chrome open continuously for days, sometimes weeks, keeping tabs open and treating the browser as a persistent workspace rather than an application they open and close. This is a completely reasonable workflow preference, and nothing about it is inherently wrong, but it means that downloaded updates are not applied because applying them requires a restart. Chrome that has been running for a week without restarting may have downloaded patches that fix vulnerabilities that are now being actively exploited, waiting for a restart that has not happened. Restarting Chrome does not require closing all your tabs permanently. Chrome has built-in session restoration that reopens tabs from your previous session when it restarts. Before restarting, you can use the Bookmark Manager to save important open tabs, or use Chrome's tab group feature to organize tabs you want to preserve. The restart itself takes approximately 10 to 15 seconds on most machines. The tabs reopen automatically. Your browsing session continues with an updated patched browser. The third habit is staying on the stable channel and keeping automatic updates enabled in your system settings. On Windows, Chrome updates through Google Update, a background service that checks for and downloads Chrome updates automatically. On Mac, Chrome has its own update mechanism. Disabling these mechanisms in pursuit of stability or control, which some guides recommend for various reasons, removes the automatic protection that keeps Chrome patched without requiring manual action. The automatic update system is specifically designed to minimize the gap between patch availability and patch installation. Disabling it shifts responsibility for that gap entirely to manual checking, which most users do not do consistently. The vulnerabilities being patched in Chrome updates are not hypothetical scenarios that security researchers construct for demonstration purposes. They are bugs in real code that real attackers actively investigate and exploit. Google's threat analysis group documents active exploitation of Chrome vulnerabilities in its security advisories, using language like, "This vulnerability has been exploited in the wild to indicate that attackers are actively using a bug before or after a patch is available." These are not edge cases. They are the documented reality of what happens to unpatched browsers in the current threat environment. The habits that protect against this reality are not complicated. They do not require technical knowledge. They do not require purchasing security software. Checking Chrome, our settings, help takes 15 seconds. Clicking the update indicator and relaunching takes 10 seconds. Restarting Chrome periodically rather than leaving it running indefinitely costs nothing. Together, these habits keep the gap between patch availability and patch installation to a minimum, which is the concrete security improvement they provide. The broader context worth understanding is that browser security has genuinely improved dramatically over the past decade. Chrome's sandbox architecture, its frequent update cycle, the investment Google makes in finding and patching vulnerabilities through Project Zero, and the security improvements built into each new version collectively make Chrome a substantially more secure browser than browsers from 10 years ago. The vulnerabilities being patched are real and serious. The defense in depth that Chrome provides, the sandbox, the site isolation, the multiple layers of protection between web content and your system means that successfully exploiting Chrome is difficult and expensive, even for sophisticated attackers. But defense in depth works only when every layer is current. A patched sandbox provides protection. An unpatched browser with a critical vulnerability in its content process provides that critical vulnerability as an entry point, regardless of how well the sandbox was designed. The patch is the layer that keeps the architecture working as designed. Applying it promptly is what makes the rest of the security engineering matter. If there is one habit that actually improves your security today without requiring any technical knowledge, any software purchase, or any significant time investment, it is keeping your browser updated, not uninstalling it. Not switching to a different browser as a security measure, not installing additional security tools, simply checking Chrome, our settings, help once a week, clicking the update indicator when it appears, and restarting Chrome periodically. The security engineers at Google are doing the hard work of finding and fixing the vulnerabilities. The habit of applying their work promptly is the only thing required from you. It takes 30 seconds. It matters. Let me go deeper on something that most security guides mention in passing but rarely explain with enough specificity to be useful, which is what actually happens during an exploit attempt against an unpatched browser, and why the technical details matter for understanding the urgency of keeping Chrome current. When a security researcher discovers a memory corruption vulnerability in Chrome, they typically develop a proof of concept that demonstrates the bug is exploitable rather than just theoretically present. A proof of concept for use after free vulnerability in Chrome might work like this. A specially crafted web page contains JavaScript that causes Chrome's JavaScript engine to allocate and then free a specific object, then access that object again through a reference that should no longer be valid. If the vulnerability is present, this access succeeds, and the attacker can read from or write to memory that Chrome intended to have freed. By carefully controlling the timing and layout of memory allocations, an experienced attacker can shape this into reliable code execution in the renderer process. The phrase reliable code execution is significant. It means the attacker can cause Chrome to execute code of their choosing with a degree of consistency across affected versions. Not every attempt succeeds. Exploit reliability depends on factors, including the operating system, the Chrome version, the machine's memory layout, and other variables. Modern exploit mitigations, including address space layout randomization, which randomizes where code and data are placed in memory, and control flow integrity, which restricts what code can be called from what locations, make achieving reliable code execution harder than it was a decade ago. But they make it harder, not impossible. Skilled attackers with sufficient motivation and resources routinely develop reliable exploits against patched vulnerabilities. The same skills applied to unpatched vulnerabilities are even more effective because the vulnerability is confirmed and documented in CVE reports. The sandbox escape that follows a successful content process exploit is a separate and typically harder challenge. Chrome's sandbox restricts what system resources the renderer process can access. A sandboxed renderer process that has been compromised can execute code, but cannot directly access the file system, cannot launch other applications, cannot communicate with other processes on the system, and cannot make most system calls. Escaping the sandbox requires finding a second vulnerability, typically in the code that mediates communication between the sandboxed renderer and the privileged browser process. Sandbox escape vulnerabilities are separately tracked and patched in Chrome's update notes. When Google labels a vulnerability as critical, it is typically because the vulnerability either enables direct sandbox escape or, when combined with another known bug class, creates a credible path to full system compromise. High-severity vulnerabilities are those that could lead to significant security impacts, typically through enabling code execution. In the sandboxed renderer, which an attacker might then chain with a separate sandbox escape. Medium and low-severity vulnerabilities are typically information disclosure bugs, bugs that require user interaction to exploit, or bugs whose impact is limited by other mitigations. Google's Project Zero team, which researches vulnerabilities in software used by the public, publishes detailed write-ups of the vulnerabilities they discover after a defined disclosure period. Reading these write-ups provides a concrete picture of the kind of research that goes into finding Chrome bugs. A typical Project Zero report describes the vulnerable code, the conditions required to trigger the bug, the impact of successful exploitation, and the technical details of how a proof of concept was developed. These reports are public and educational, intended to help the security community understand vulnerability classes and improve defenses. They also serve as documentation of exactly how specific classes of Chrome bugs work, which has value for understanding the update urgency. The time-pressure dimension of patch deployment has been studied by security researchers who track the gap between patch release and exploit availability. The general finding is that this gap has shrunk significantly over the past decade. In 2010, the average time from a patch release to a publicly available exploit for a patched vulnerability was measured in weeks to months. By 2020, this gap had shrunk to days for high-profile vulnerabilities. The acceleration reflects improvements in reverse engineering tooling, the growth of the vulnerability research community, and the increased documentation available about vulnerability classes and exploitation techniques. For Chrome users specifically, this means that the window during which they are protected by not yet being targeted before exploit code for a newly patched vulnerability is publicly available is shorter than it has ever been. Applying patches within hours or days of release, rather than waiting until the next convenient restart opportunity, meaningfully reduces exposure. The enterprise dimension of Chrome security is worth mentioning because it illustrates a contrast that illuminates the consumer security situation. Enterprise IT departments that manage Chrome deployments at scale use Google's Chrome Enterprise tools to control update deployment, monitor version compliance across thousands of machines, and enforce update policies that ensure machines remain within a defined version range. Enterprise security teams understand that an unpatched browser at scale is a systematic risk. They invest in tooling and processes specifically to minimize the time between patch availability and deployment across their managed fleet. Individual users have simpler tools available, primarily auto updates and the Chrome settings help page, but the underlying principle is the same. The patch exists. Getting it applied promptly is the security objective. For enterprise users, IT policy enforces this. For individual users, habit and awareness serve the same function. Chrome's site isolation feature, which was significantly enhanced after the Spectre vulnerability class was publicly disclosed in 2018, is another dimension of Chrome's security architecture worth understanding. Site isolation ensures that content from different websites runs in separate processes. This means that code from a malicious website running in its sandboxed process cannot access data from other websites loaded in other tabs, even if that code successfully escapes the renderer sandbox. Each site's content is isolated from other sites' content at the process level. This provides meaningful protection against cross-site data theft, even in scenarios where some level of exploitation has succeeded. Site isolation is enabled by default in Chrome's current versions and has been for several years. Keeping Chrome updated ensures you have the current implementation of site isolation, which has been refined and strengthened with each Chrome release. Older Chrome versions have older implementations of site isolation that may not include improvements that have been made since their release. The complete security picture for a Chrome user who applies the habits we have described is one of layered protection. Auto updates enabled means patches download automatically. Checking Chrome settings help means patches are applied promptly, rather than waiting indefinitely for a restart that might not happen. Regular browser restarts mean the window between patch, download, and patch application is measured in days rather than weeks. These habits ensure you are running the current version with the current security fixes, which means the sandboxed architecture protecting you is the most current implementation. The known vulnerabilities have been patched, and the gap available to attackers is minimized. None of these habits require understanding the technical details of use after free bugs or sandbox escapes. The habits are simple. The technical details explain why the habits matter. A browser that is current is one where Google's security engineers have done their own work, and you have applied it. A browser that is not current is one where Google's security engineers have found and fixed a problem, and you have not yet received the benefit of that fix. The difference between those two states is what the update habits we described today are designed to eliminate. Keep Chrome updated, check Chrome, settings, help regularly, restart when the update indicator appears. These three habits represent the minimum viable security practice for any Chrome user. They are free, they take seconds, and they are the most direct improvement to your browser security that exists. There is one more dimension worth addressing before we close, which is the question of whether security-conscious users who are considering switching to a privacy-focused browser like Brave or Firefox should update Chrome in the meantime, or simply switch immediately. The answer is both, sequentially. If you are currently running an outdated version of Chrome, updating it is the right immediate action, regardless of whether you plan to switch browsers. An unpatched browser is a security risk that exists right now. Switching browsers tomorrow does not eliminate the risk today. Updating Chrome takes 10 seconds and eliminates the known vulnerability exposure immediately. Then, if you decide to switch to Brave or Firefox for privacy reasons, you make that switch from a secure starting point rather than from an exposed one. This sequencing reflects a general principle about security decisions. The immediate action that reduces a current risk should not be deferred in favor of a future action that is the better long-term choice. Both actions matter. Order them by urgency. Update now. Switch when ready. The updated Chrome you run while preparing your switch is more secure than the outdated Chrome you were running before. That improvement is real and immediate, even if it is temporary. The same principle applies to all software with automatic update capabilities. Operating system updates, application updates, browser updates, and security software updates all matter for the same fundamental reason. The people maintaining that software find bugs, fix them, and release the fix. Applying the fix is how you receive the benefit of that work. The gap between fix release and fix application is your exposure window. Making that window as small as possible is the security objective. For Chrome, the tools to minimize that window are free, built in, and take 30 seconds to use. Keep your browser updated, check it today, check it next week. Build the 30-second habit that ensures the security work being done by one of the largest security research teams in the world actually reaches your machine and protects you. That is the complete security recommendation. Simple, free, and genuinely effective. If there is one habit that actually improves your security today without requiring anything beyond 30 seconds of your time, this is it. Not uninstalling Chrome, not switching browsers as a security measure. Simply keeping the browser you have current, patched, and running the fixes that Google's security team has already built for you. The work is done. Apply it.